for designing form, I'm just creating a blank page here, which will have registration form for eshop.com. That's the title of my web page. Let me make sure the correct website is selected, which is either Vehicles United or whichever I was working before. Let me quickly define my site so I have correct project. eShop. The folder is in C drive. Stamp HT docs. eShop. That's my local folder. My default images folder. So this is my local info. Remote info is local network. That's the local folder. And for the testing server, PHP MySQL, access through local network. And the URL should be eShop. Okay. Again, these steps I'm repeating almost every recording because you should know this. Every website for dynamic behavior, you should specify these three category informations: local, remote, and testing server. Okay. Now say okay. It creates temporary files. Done. And in the files panel, I will have the instructions as well as all the pages which we are creating so far, okay, for the website. In this folder, I'm going to simply save this file. Save. I'll save as. The form name is registration form dot php. You can save it as HTML as well, but maybe we can use it later on for any creations. So the form has been registered in my sites panel, and this is where I will actually create the form. That's a heading for my form. And the next line, I will actually design these form elements. Okay, I'm not working on the styling of the form, as that's not the outcome. You can save as your eShop page and create in one of your divs this particular form. I'm just showing you randomly in any blank page for a while. So here, you go to the inserts menu, inserts panel, and we select forms menu. This category will show you most of the items you required to insert form menus, form text fields, and form boxes. So here, I can simply click on form, which is the first element you should add when you create a form. Okay. Now, this is a parent tag, just like a table. The actual contents for the table comes from tr and tds, but we still have to initiate the HTML form, the HTML table tag, which contains the whole table's properties of width, height, colors, and so on. Same principle goes to form. Before you add any text field, or even a single button or text field, like for the search box, we just have one text field and one button. So even if you have that kind of elements to your web page, even they should go inside a form, okay, as a parent form tag. Now, without that, your form will not be functional. It will not function in terms of submitting button and working in terms of reality. Okay, so always make sure whenever you're working with a form, first thing you should add is the parent form tag. Okay, always. So when I add this form tag, it gives you these red dotted lines, which is an indication of the form's area, the form's boundary. And if you see the code view, you can check it adds the actual form tag opening pair and the closing pair. Okay, in design view, that you see in terms of the red dotted lines. So in between, if your cursor is there, it means in code view, it's between the opening and the closing of the form tag. Okay. Now, once you add the form, just don't keep it default. Try and give as many values and attributes you can. So when my cursor is inside the form, check the properties panel. It gives you the form ID, action, method, targets, encoding types, and classes. So if you don't give all of it, at least give the form ID, method, and action. So I'm going to give a form ID based on what the purpose of the form is. So my purpose of the form is a registration form. Apply, and you get the ID as well. Action is when you submit button, when you click on the submit, where the form should go. So generally, if you design a page for the confirmation where it says thank you for submitting the form, okay, normally you get, when you submit the form, you get some kind of confirmation page. If you don't get that, that's a bad designing, because your visitors off site get lost. They don't know whether it's submitted, they not, and so on. So for time being, I will create a simple web page, something similar, a simple HTML blank page, which will say, is a page from template. Let me just create a blank template page, which will say, thank you for submitting your registration form. Okay. Let me give it a format. Confirmation of user registration. I'm going to save this file as a small HTML page called confirm.html. Right, so this confirm.html page is also in the same folder as the other pages of your website. If I switch back to registration form, here in the properties for the action attribute, you can simply browse by clicking on the folder and select the confirm page. That's the one. So that action means when you submit the form, this is the page by default will appear, which will display the message saying it's been submitted. Okay. Methods, there are two methods, get and post. By default, as you can see, Dreamweaver automatically takes as post. Okay. In HTML, by default, method is used as post. I think we have spent time in level 2 about what the post method does for you. Now, in practice, what it does is when you submit a form, generally your values of the form goes to the database, okay, in terms of searching or in terms of inserting the records or in terms of retrieving the values, right? Now, how these values of your form should go into the database? They should go in through the URL of your website, or they should go hidden as a part of the body of your website. Okay? If the form values are too many, if it's large values you're sending, then the post is the best method, because post, it sends all the form values to the database in a hidden body content. Okay? But with the get method, it actually sends with the URL. Like Google, if I just submit, this is the Google's form, one single text field. But if I send a value saying ELAT courses and hit the search submit, the moment I submit, you see the URL of Google. Here somewhere it sends my form values which I typed as a query through my URL. Now, Google can afford to send those kind of queries through the URL. Look at this. The moment I submit, the values of the form goes in the query. It makes it quicker when you send it to the URL. But in terms of privacy, it's not good, because if anyone's sitting next to you, they can see actually what you have submitted. Okay? Hackers can also have access to the URLs quite easy. But Google software or application like that, they don't bother because it's a public thing you're sending. But if it is personal information, it's not ideal to send something through URL of your website. Okay? So when a web designer designs a form and on submit, the value goes through the URL, assume they are using get method for their form. Okay? If they use post method for the form, the moment you submit the form button, the URL will not see any string of values. All your values will go to the database, but they will be hidden in the body of your web page, so no one sees it. Okay? So one is security, another is how many values you are sending. So if you are sending short number of values or less values, send it through get. Like Google has only one text field, so they're not sending too many different informations. But if you have form like registration, which will have your name, surname, number, email, a comment, which will have 3-4 paragraph lines, you know, it's a lot of values and characters you're gonna send to the database. So that time is ideal to use post. So large values. So whenever you want to send large values and when you want to send them hidden, use post as a method. And when you want to send small amounts of values and you're not bothered about security as much, then use get method. In interviews, they might ask you these questions. A lot of interviewers like this question. Easy to ask. What's the difference in get and post method? You should be able to explain this way. You might find more additional information about it, which you can just Google search and see what additional information you get. But in general, this is vital information you should know in terms of the amount of value and in terms of how it actually goes to the database. The transport mode, is it through the URL or the transporting is through the body? Okay. So the registration form, no need to explain. It's gonna send a lot of values. I will be using it as the post. Later on, for the website, I will show you how to create search to search contents within your own website. That will be single text field. So when that process, we will use just get method for the form. Okay. With that explanation, I'm inside the form tag and let me add first field. So if I'll just add, click on this text field option from the inserts menu, it will ask you a couple of attributes to add. So ID, I'm using it for full name, and the label. Now the label is something which will be visible in the browser. Okay. Normally when you see text fields in the websites, they will have some label before it. Okay. So that label will actually go through this particular attribute here. Now that I can say, let's say full name. So you can use ID, you can use label, which will be visible. ID will normally be used by databases to connect it with the columns. So make sure you put them correctly. I would prefer to have it without any space. So have it as a one word. Okay. Don't put any underscores or dash. Just keep it one small word. Okay. Same time, don't keep it generic. Don't keep it field 1, field 2. So no, it will be difficult. So keep your IDs related to what that text field is for. Okay. Right. The styling of the label, you want to wrap it together. You want to attach it as a for attribute or without any label tag. Label tag was introduced in XHTML. Okay. So when it actually displays this text before text field, it will add it with the for attribute is the best option. Because when searching or screen readers, they read information to the blind people. They actually read this attribute for them as well. So for accessibility, it's good to have attach label tag using for attribute. Okay. Then the position, whether you want to display labels before the text field or after the text field. So select before. Access keys and tab indexes, you can mention. Access key is a shortcut key. So on a keyboard, if you press any key, the cursor will highlight that text field. Okay. I try and avoid it sometimes because it might conflict with your existing shortcuts. So try and avoid that. But tab index means when you press tab on your keyboard, your cursor will navigate through one by one each text field. So you can actually guide your users when they press tab which text field the cursor should jump. Okay, for accessibility, it's very important. I think in ACA exams also you might have got this question. For accessibility, what can you do? So when you mention tab order, this is where you actually mention it. If I'll use 1, means first time when I hit tab, cursor will jump to this text field. Okay. For the next text field, once we add, we can set its tab index number 2. Right. So when you press tab second time, the focus of the cursor will be in that text field. So this way you can mention the tabbing index for your boxes. Right. If I say OK, there you go. This is how it looks. Label appears before, text field appears here, and in the code you can see the label has been added as a special label tag, and text field is added as like that. Okay. It will have its name, ID, tab index, and the type as just a normal text box. Okay. Apart from this, when you go in design view, you can actually click on the text field, and do you see the properties panel? It gives you far more options. You can set the number of characters you want to insert. Okay, maximum characters. So sometimes you get conditions like your password should not be more than 8. Okay, so if you try to type more than 8 letters, the text field will not even allow you to go forward. That's because in the properties, the set, the maximum character should be only 8. So this way you can use this properties panel quite a lot. There's something called initial value. Now what this initial value means, the moment you see this text field in the browser, inside the text box itself, it will have some default message. Sometimes they give you a hint, like if I'll just type here, type your name here. Do you see that? You get a message as a hint, as a default value. So any default values which you want to show in the text field, just type it here. Okay? It's not mandatory, it's up to you. Right, that's my first text field. On the next line, I can insert another text field. This time it will be for password. Rest, I'm keeping it as it is, default, tab index 2. I got second text field, but this time when you select the text field, from the properties, set the type of the text field as password. Okay, with this type, let me quickly save this page, and if I'll preview, that's my form. Do you see that? Default values, so you can have password, you will not see. So if you just keep text box as a plain text field, you'll be actually seeing what you're typing. So it's very important to hide your characters by setting the text field property type as password. Okay, that's another important thing. Well, the next option is, this time I will add an email text field. Okay, let me show you the second type of form elements, which is SPRY. With the SPRY text fields, they will have inbuilt validation, means they will have inbuilt conditions to choose, right? Now, what those conditions are, let me show you. If you scroll down, at the top of the form section, you will have plain form elements. Plain means they don't have any ready-made conditions to use for you. You have to code it yourself. But sometimes if you want to insert a text field like for email address, I want to make sure when someone submits a form, they don't submit email box empty, right? Sometimes if you try and leave your form empty, it warns you that you have left this field. Make sure you go and fill it. Or if you try and enter wrong email address without @ symbol, again they will give you error saying please write the correct email address. It's very important to have this validation, because once you submit the records to database, the values submitted without conditions will be worthless. You can't use it. Okay, that's why websites, they make sure that any value, the important values, something like contact number, email address, which is very important, must be there in the correct form. Okay, so to make sure how users can do that and how you can tell them these warnings is to use SPRY validation text fields. Now, SPRY validation text fields will have all these conditions inbuilt. For example, next line, I'm going to click on SPRY validation text field. ID is email, label is email address, attached before tab index 3. Okay. This is how it looks. It will have its blue tab. We are all familiar with this process because we have used SPRY before. Okay, so it gives you the blue tab at the top, but the beauty is, look at the properties bar now. For the plain text fields, the property bar was giving you few options, but with the SPRY, it gives you options where you can select the conditions from the type menu. Okay, do you see here? There's a required checkbox. If that checkbox is ticked, means if you try to leave the text field empty and submit, the browser will prompt you a warning saying this field is compulsory to be filled. Okay, and you can set minimum characters, maximum characters, so you can apply that kind of conditions. You can give them a hints. You can change the preview status. So what should be the messages on the preview status? And let's just scroll down to see what kind of conditions you can apply. So if I'm using it for email address, you can just scroll down and you see type of conditions it gives you. You can select from the range of conditions like integer. What's integer means? Integer means a whole number, anything from 0 to 10, 0 to 9. So for contact number, if someone type text, will that be useful? There should be only numbers in it. That's why when you insert contact text field, use integer as a condition. Okay. Email address, by default, it will check conditions for @ symbol, .com, .co, those kind of extensions are there in place. So these are ready-made functions. Okay. There's a credit card conditions, there's a zip code conditions, there's a phone number condition, social security number. Now this phone number and social security, these conditions are mainly for United States. Like we have national insurance, USA has social security number. Okay, so not usable for us. Maybe we can trick around using numbers or as an integer conditions and so on. Okay. For contact number also, predefined conditions are based on USA formats. So I've tried using a couple of times, but it doesn't work quite well. So even I left it basic conditions that it is required and type as integer. So as long as I get some numbers. But don't try and use too many. Average visitors of your site, if they don't like you bothering them with too many rules and conditions, they will not fill the form. Okay, so don't put too many required fields, don't put too many conditions fields. They're gonna get upset and not fill the form at all. So when I submit forms these days, modern websites, all they required is and email address. As long as they have that, they can send newsletters, they can promote offers, discounts, vouchers, communications, and all that sort of things. Okay. Very hardly these days you can see that organizations asking for numbers, uh, mobile numbers, and so on. People like communication on email only. So again, try and implement a strategy the way you want to develop your form. So I'm going to select the type for my third text box as the type is email address. You can see automatically it takes the condition. It is required. And what you see is by default, if it is invalid, means if someone don't enter at the rate, that's violation of your condition. Straight away they will get this message, invalid format. Okay. If you want to change this message, you simply click in there and change the message whatever you want. Please enter valid email address. So some tweaking you can do it yourself. Okay. If it goes wrong, the text field will have a red background color as well. Now this is all happening with CSS of SPRY menu, SPRY validation field. Okay. If I click on the SPRY text field again, that's the message I will get for invalid format. You can change the preview state to required. So when the required condition will be checked by browser, if someone leaves it empty, the warning will come as a value is required. Now, sometimes users don't understand these terminologies. So you can say a message for that preview stage as please enter email address. Okay. So you can actually change your status. Initially, there is no condition at all. Okay. But if you want, you can add another condition there initially as asterisk, and you can type compulsory field. So initially they will see this message. In spite of that, even if they don't fill, they will get the second warning, which is please enter the email address. Yeah. And invalid format, please enter the valid format. Compulsory field we can write somewhere else, I think. Let me just keep it somewhere else. Not as a part of the text field. Outside the text field. So initial required. Oh, we'll dodge around a bit. Initial initial value. Maybe we can just add asterisk here. Okay. And then we can mention at the bottom somewhere that this field is compulsory or something. But you can do all this tweaking as you're styling. And if it is valid, this is how the text will look. It will show you the green background, means everything is correct. All right. The next line, I'm going back to the form. Insert button, which is another field here in your forms. For a button, just enter the ID. You don't require actually any labels for the buttons. So I'm just going to say no label tag, because buttons, they stand on their own. Okay. So just submit OK. And by default, it will show you submit as a label or the value of your button. But in the properties, you can change the value. You can mention here submit my registration. Okay. So the button's label will change on top of it. Okay. If you're using it for submit, make sure the action should be submit form. If you want, you can add another button. This time I will use it for reset. And for that button, I can change the value to reset form. And the action for the reset form should be reset. Okay? Reset will clear all the entered values and you can start submitting the form again. Okay? Now, with the basic instructions like that, let me save this page. The moment I try and save, the Dreamweaver prompts you to save JavaScript file and CSS file. This is for SPRY. So all these validations and conditions and checking is happening through the JavaScript code. We don't type it, but SPRY will give you that as an external file. Okay, so you have to say OK. And you can see the SPRY assets will have those two documents in there. If I open the SPRY assets, the validation text field.js, look at the JavaScript conditions. Look at the lines of codes. This is for email text field. Because we're checking too many things. We're checking require, email formats, extensions, and it does it on its own. So that's your form. Let me just file, save it, save all. Let's have a preview. And here goes your form. I can type whatever I want, password, an email address. We can do experiment. So if I just type James and submit my form, it's wrong. So it's giving me error. Okay, invalid format. If I leave it empty, submit, please enter email address, another error. Okay, and if I just do correct, green fields, and because there's an action, it automatically goes to the confirmation page. Okay, now in between this journey of submission, next part I'm going to show you how we can take these values, create a database for it, and enter these submitted values into our database as well. Okay, but that will be the next part. For time being, you can design this form, add some SPRY validation fields, and see how it works in terms of confirmation page versus validation as well. Okay, stop the recording.